This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street, opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So item 1 on the agenda is appointment of substitutes. Do we have any substitutes, Julian?
Yes, Chair. We've got Stephen Hodgson here in place of Lucy Hodgson this evening. Can also mention as well, Councillor Mel Orcott has said that she will be with us. She may be a few minutes late. We've also got Shane Flynn, Corporate Director of Finance and Resources, joining us online. So, although it's not on the screen at the moment, if Shane wishes to contribute, he'll turn his camera on and we'll be able to hear him on screen.
Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Yes, Mark.
Chair, Chair, I understand there was a reference to the County Council in their grants paper later about public health. I'm a member of the County Council Cabinet, so I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you. Public representation, do we have any tonight? So then we come to the minutes of the previous meeting. I hope you've all had a chance to peruse them. I'm going to go through them page by page. Just let me know if you've got any comments. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. Okay, we're now on to the first substantial item. I'd just like to point out that we do have quite a long agenda tonight, and I've tried to look at each item and decide more or less how long it might take. So I've got a time kind of in my mind when we might have a break, but we'll see how it's going. If we can get through it without a break, then that would be better. So Q2 financial monitoring, over to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This is the half-year monitoring report for the position at the end of September, forecasting through to the end of March. You'll see from paragraph 3.1 that we're forecasting a deficit of just over £750,000. This is an increase from the Q1 forecast. And if I refer you to Appendix 1, the table there compares the key elements of the Q1 forecast, those for Q2, and the difference between them in the middle column. If you run your eyes down that column, you can see the key items there that have moved, contributing to the total difference of 299,000. Obviously, the single biggest of those is the annual increase in salaries, which since the Q1 forecast was done, the higher than expected, higher than forecast salary increase has now been agreed, which increases the budget variance by 420,000. Offsetting that is the fact that the council has a number of vacancies which it's attempting to fill, and more than we would have expected. So there's a favourable variance there of 178,000 that offsets that. At the top, in the same column, you see against leisure services, a benefit there of 124,000. The leisure operator is now telling us that The situation, they believe, has, in terms of membership income, has improved, and we now expect, with a fair wind, to receive the full year's budgeted management fee, and hence the improvement since Q1 of 124. Underneath that, car parking income, on the other hand, is improving. We can refer to the graph in a minute in the report, but is still not achieving the forecast that we hoped. And then further down on the line, interest receivable. As we're all aware, the government has increased interest rates significantly in the last couple of months. The position for the council on that is that our borrowing costs don't increase because our borrowing is fixed at the time we take out the loan. So our borrowing is at low rates. Conversely, any surplus money that we put on deposit, which is usually fairly short term, but is now earning us a much better rate of interest than we originally expected in the budget. Hence the improvement there compared to Q1 of 160,000, and an overall favourable variance of the budget of 479, which is obviously quite significant. In terms of the report itself, the report is quite long, and given time, I don't propose to go through it all, but I think a couple of points worth noting in the income section. If you look at paragraph 4.7.1, the car parking section, the graph there shows quite well how income has increased during the year, and particularly against last year, when obviously we were in a period of lockdown. The positive message, although it's still only 1 month, but for October, the forecast there was due to increase compared to September. And although we're still working on the car park income because of the credit card problems, all the signs are that October's income has been quite strong and is achieving that forecast. If that trend continues, then that will be encouraging. And then we're forecasting for the rest of the year to get a little closer to the budget, but to still be slightly short of it. Over the page in 474 and 475 for garden and trade waste, these are a good success story for us. As you can see from the notes on garden waste, the new accounts that were opened during the pandemic are being renewed, which is good. And we've therefore got a 6.6% growth compared to last year. That does include the 2.5% price increase, but does represent some real growth. And we're therefore 57k over the budget. For trade waste, the budget is 845,000, which was set a couple of years ago when we took on the new university contract. Obviously, because of the pandemic and the associated lockdown, we struggled to achieve that budget, but the positive message is that we're now within only 15k of it, and that is a considerable achievement. Having said that, the planning income, the graph in 474, is continuing to fall short of the budget. It is a volatile income area, so the forecast shows that we're hoping that will improve, but that does remain a bit of a risk for us. And the only other thing I'd bring you to your attention is in council tax and business rates, section 8. 2 points here. The business rates receipts are short of the budget by just over 4%. That's not particularly significant. It is better than it was at this time last year, when we were under the effects of the lockdown. We're monitoring that closely and hoping that it will improve. The write-offs for council tax and business rates have been particularly small in the last quarter. You can see in paragraph 8.2, nothing on council tax and only 33k, 6 cases on business rates. We shouldn't read anything into that. That's mainly because from a revenue and benefits point of view, they've changed onto the new system and have delayed doing any write-offs in the main until that work's complete. The only other point I'd just bring to your attention is a typo in paragraph 6.4, which refers to the £3 million short-term investment we have with Thurrock Council, which I'm sure you're all aware of. On the 4th line of that paragraph, it says that Thurrock has now borrowed 0.8 million from the PWLB. That should read 0.8 billion. And obviously it makes rather a difference. So apologies for that. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
On that report. I have Mark and Chris. Mark? I mean,
Thank you, Chair. Oh, is it working? It looked like it had gone off. Right, I'm on. Okay, could I just ask for clarity, really, about the chart, particularly the trade waste one? Because it looks like trade waste is being shown cumulatively, whereas all the other ones show a month-by-month basis of income. I just wondered why, just from a presentational perspective, we'd done that, because it gives it a different perspective. It makes it look like it's huge, like we're going to be doing. If you could read in the other ones, it looks like you're going to be making 8 million or something like that.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. The graphs are presented differently. If that's confused anybody, then obviously I apologise for that. The reason for doing so is that trade waste is billed quarterly in advance, whereas the other income streams are all monthly. Hence, you can see in that the graph on page 16, there's a step up each quarter. The reason for doing it is if you show this monthly, you get huge waves. It's probably the best way of describing it. So have a huge peak, it comes down to hardly anything in the next 2 months and then shoots back up again. It just looks a very odd graph then. I'm happy to revert to it being monthly if anybody would find that easier. I think, as I said earlier, I think the positive news in trade waste is that we're going to generate more income than we've ever done. And having got a new member of the team in place as well, who's going to do more marketing for new accounts than we've done before, hopefully we'll see that continue to grow.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. My first question, in para 4.2, we mentioned that our council expenditure increase is approximately 2%, which you know, given the current rate of inflation, which you mentioned is 10%. How come we've managed to keep our inflation down to 2%, or have I misread that? Because I assume all our costs across the board must be going. It does mention food prices. I don't think we're buying much food, but 4.2, where they have to come and get it. Yeah, first bullet. 524k higher expenditure on a budget of 26 million is a variance of 2%. Yet we talk earlier in the presentation, or the paper, sorry, about inflation being at 10%. Well, we seem to be doing very well, which congratulations. I'm just wondering how we've managed to do that.
Thank you. I could probably spend quite a long time answering this, which I'll not to get bogged down. But very briefly, the 26 million, for example, includes payroll costs, and as we've seen, the pay rise is going to be greater than the budget, but we've then got significant number of vacancies, within that, which is then holding back the increase. I can't think of anything else specifically. I'll prepare you a separate answer if that would help.
Mark, that's great, thank you. It was just of interest to me. And my other question is 4.71, and again, I want to make sure I've read this correctly. We've got an increase in PCN income of 36k. Is that because we're giving out that many more tickets? 4.71.
Thank you. Essentially, yes, because the price of the PCN ticket at £35, I think, last time I had one, hasn't changed. So therefore, by default, yes, we are giving out more tickets. I think, I mean, 36k is in the context of the budget being 500,000. So it's still a relatively small variance, and it's helped by the fact that I think we've got a greater complement of people with running fewer vacancies in that team than we have previously.
Yeah. No. My question was not so much about the size of the money as whether we had a real problem with poor parking around the city, which there are parts of the city which I'm sure councillors would agree we do, but it seems to be, at least we're ticketing these people now, we're hopefully deterring them from doing it again in the future. But it just seemed a large rise to me, but thank you.
Who's next?
Chair, thanks very much. I mean, probably a very quick one, but in terms of garden waste income, which is a great result, is there enough yet to indicate a trend emerging in terms of renewals? Because like you mentioned it there, but I was just thinking, you know, are we in a position where we can begin to sort of track that?
Thank you. Yes, if you refer to the graph on page 14, you can see there that we have a big spike in August when we do more annual renewals than any other month. Having come through that spike, and bearing in mind that the previous August would have been during the pandemic still, I think that shows that those renewals are happening. Obviously, people are renewing annually, so it's still early days, but I would hope that people who took out an account during the pandemic and are now renewing it in more normal times will continue to do so and realise it's actually very good value for money.
It's great result and very good value for money.
Oh, sorry. Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind how quickly housing costs can inflate our budget or cause us budget pressures, shall we say, I was very interested in the deficit on housing benefit subsidy and on the higher temporary accommodation costs, because it amounts to rather a lot of money. And I wondered if we were thinking of short to medium term even of actually building or acquiring more temporary accommodation to bring that down, because it seemed to me we did successfully do that before, and yeah.
I'll make a start. Thank you. Yes, we've I think it was the Income Gen subcommittee received a report very recently looking at the opportunity in terms of acquiring significant additional properties, and we're doing some feasibility work on that with regard to affordable housing. And also today at leadership team meeting, we were presented with an opportunity of acquiring some additional property on a short-term lease, which would allow us to put people into accommodation rather than putting them into hotels and bed and breakfasts. And we've agreed today that we will bring that to the attention of the appropriate chair and vice chair and the ward members before we proceed with that particular lease agreement. So yes, I think it's something that is, I was going to say hardly a week goes by, but I think hardly a day goes by without a discussion regarding additional affordable housing being a requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. But my understanding is that one of the proposals you've just spoken about, and I'm not sure how much I can say at this stage, but how much we're allowed to say at this stage, I'm not sure what the commercial issues are around them yet. But it is affordable housing you were talking about in that particular project, rather than social housing. And I was really thinking more of the issues around social housing and temporary accommodation that we have, because we do have bottlenecks, particularly with move-on accommodation.
Yeah, I was trying to cover both actually. You're absolutely right. The larger scale opportunity is around affordable housing. The other item that I mentioned that we talked about today was temporary accommodation in order to avoid putting people into short-term hotel accommodation or bed and breakfast. So the conversation is ongoing on both ends of the spectrum, as it were.
Thank you very much. I just, a couple of points. With regard, thank you to Mark for a very good report and for a very clear explanation of it. And it's clear that, you know, our current budget position, I guess, as it always is a combination of swings and roundabouts, isn't it? That some things are doing better than expected, some less good. And I would suggest that's the answer to Chris's question. So the variance of 2% is not about inflation. That is a budgetary variance. So inflation has elements of swings and roundabouts for us as a council, in that our investments have brought in more income than expected, and we've got greater costs than expected.
If I may, it refers to expenditure. So that doesn't talk about income, that talks about our expenditure, which would be impacted by inflation. So therefore, it refers directly to expenditure, not to other income as well. That's my reading of it. I mean, let's not have a mathematical argument here or discussion here, but yeah, but no, different point, but yeah.
And then if I, a question on the Appendix 5, which is fees and charges, the housing licence income, is that HMOs, or is it HMOs and something else as well?
Thank you. Yes, this is HMO licence income, covering both mandatory and I think we call them additional licences.
Thank you very much, Mark. Then we move on to agenda item 6, which is the Q2 performance report.
I'll pick that one up, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me a moment. Sorry, I just need to scroll forward. So Q2 performance. I won't go through all of the indicators, but by exception, make reference to a few of the points. So first of all, city centre transport strategy. Just to highlight that the emerging draft will set out, as bullet pointed here, a number of options from the business as usual, which is of relatively light touch, another way of putting it, through to scenario 1, scenario 2, and through to significantly ambitious projects. And that will be for members to discuss and for members to agree on the most appropriate way forward. You'll see further down in terms of the update that there are various activities now taking place between autumn of this year and through to spring, early 23. And I hope very much that we'll have the piece of work concluded by spring of 23, so that the output from this piece of work will feed into the County Council's update of Local Transport Plan 5, which will commence in the spring. That was that item. The next note I'd wish to make is there are some projects here. You'll see Shrub Hill under Town Fund, Active Travel under Towns Fund, Heritage Towns Fund, and Community Skills. The role of this committee was to agree the sign off of the business cases and get agreement from the department on all of these projects and the funding allocation. That's all now been completed. So I am proposing for members to agree that at this committee now, those items will no longer be reported as individual performance items at this committee, but as previously agreed, they will continue to appear on the performance scorecards of the relevant other policy committees. If I can move on to UK Shared Prosperity Fund, it is disappointing to note that we still have not had formal agreement of our business case. This is not a bidding process, just to remind everybody. This was a funding allocation of just under 2.9 million over the life of the programme. The allocation for this year is 357,000, you'll see. That has to be spent by the end of March, and therefore we are being encouraged by the department to proceed in delivering against the projects before we receive formal approval of our business case. So again, I'm just bringing that to members' attention. We certainly as officers want to press on and start delivering on these programmes. As I say, it's not a bidding process, it is an allocation. So I would hope, I'm just thinking about any announcements later this week, I hope very much that we don't have any last minute changes of allocation. But on the basis that we don't have any changes of allocation this week, we do want to carry on and proceed with that investment. Some of that investment is important for this year. It will fund certain things around the Christmas fair activities, for example. So if we don't spend it and we don't commit it this year, we will have a problem. Those were the things I wanted to mention in terms of the policy areas. In terms of key performance, I'll take any questions. The only one that really stands out, and it won't be any surprise to any of you, is that there was a significant increase in the number of complaints last quarter, and that was due to our problems with car parking. So if anybody wishes to raise any other questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I have a question about customer satisfaction with the council. I see it's improved, but it still seems to be quite low. And I wondered, that is, it's one of the KPIs.
If you're referring to the one I think you are, you're talking about the annual survey.
Oh.
So that will be reported once a year. We're out at the moment with the annual survey. So hopefully we'll get the report back in due course in terms of the latest change. Is it the annual one you're referring to? Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, it's across every area of the business.
Mm.
So councils being what they are,
Yeah.
it's difficult to see whether we would make any improvement. I'm not so sure. We'll see.
Pat and then Chris.
Not a question, but more of a comment. I'd really like to go on record, and I think many of us would, to commend the staff team who dealt and are still dealing with the parking issues. They've done an extraordinarily good job and in trying circumstances. So yes, that's just all I wanted to say about that.
Can I respond by saying, first of all, thank you. A lot of people spent many hours, many evenings and weekends trying to resolve the matter. And there was, and I sent some of you, I know I've made reference to this previously to some of you, there were on occasion some very nice emails from residents saying thank you very much. And there was one particular resident where not only had we provided her with some financial help, we had done some trimming in her garden as well while we were there. So it was a lovely email we received from her, thanking us very much for our help. So there were on occasion the opportunities to take victory from the jaws of defeat, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment more than a question, but under key performance indicators committed to people, we seem to have only one green. So, and the other three indicators, 3 are red and 1 is yellow. is that something we need to be concerned about? That's member attendance is green, mandatory at training, sickness absence average is red, voluntary leavers rate is red, average time taken to a point is amber, and then staff survey levels of engagement is red. It just seems a cluster in that one area.
Yes, sickness absence did increase, and if you look at the individual graph, you'll see, I think from memory, we're now back at around 3.2 days compared to an on-quarter comparison of 3.1, the same quarter for last year. I think that's near enough. So we're sort of on trend after having moved in the wrong direction. Voluntary leavers has come down again, going back, if I recall rightly, from the graph. Staff survey, we're just in the process now of doing our annual staff survey, and after year-on-year improvement for a number of years in terms of staff engagement and feeling, it did take a dip last year. It is concerning, of course. Without wishing to be in any way complacent, I think the last 18 months have taken their toll on people in terms of certainly COVID, working from home, coming back in the office, absence, and it's been hard. So we all very much hope now that now we're back to a business as usual perspective, that the trends will start to move in the right direction. But yeah, we are keeping a close eye on it.
I mean, just to celebrate a couple of areas of excellent performance, particularly Trinity Street. So virtually every single person, 98% waiting time, less than 10 minutes of actually, staff being there to meet appointments. I mean, that's absolutely superb, very impressive. And the other one I wanted, to celebrate and just to ask a question is traineeships, including apprentices. So we have 11. Do we take people as part of the LGA management training scheme, or do we participate in that?
Through you, Chair. No, we don't currently. It is something that has been discussed amongst district HR teams, and it hasn't been something that districts have readily put their hands up for in recent years because of the need to rotate that post amongst different teams and not count them in your full complement. So sort of you've got them and then they've got to move on and so on. We are exploring some, that's not to say we're not exploring apprenticeships, and we are exploring one at the moment on a cross-council basis. So doing something at a very local level, which would look like something the LGA would do, but perhaps not badging it as a graduate scheme, but looking at what would work for us. And then the other thing I just want to say about apprenticeships is there's a couple in there that have converted very rapidly into permanent appointments. So you lose the data that they were apprentices, but you gain their permanent employment, and we've had some success in that regard. So it's, we're very much open to apprenticeships, and when we look at the vacancies that come through, we always ask the question, can they be recruited as an apprentice?
Thank you. Yes, I'm just going to go back onto this page 55, the sickness absent one, and actually have a slightly different angle on it and say, when I first went on this council in the early noughties, I sat on a special task and finish group when we were looking at our absent days lost due to PPE, and we were talking about 7-8% back then. So what I would say is those figures there are actually really, really good in the historical context and that. And what I would also make a comment is, I think in general, I know we have got a few red things on here, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because actually what it demonstrates is we're actually setting targets that are challenging rather than just having a lot of, when I've seen these reports before with lots of like green ticks and those sort of things, and we aren't really challenging ourselves, just saying how well we've done. So what I would say, the important thing is the trends are what actually matters, and we understand why some of these are over. But please make sure that across all the committees of this council, because I know I don't sit on this committee very often, that we do set targets that are challenging, and that if we do see a few red ones occasionally, we shouldn't get uptight about it, but we should be using those as a means of driving further performance improvement.
No, thank you, Chair. Sorry, it was a point that was raised about Trinity House that sort of nudged my memory of another question I had, and it goes probably linked between Councillor Denham's comment of congratulating them, which is good because I spent some time down there, and very, very interesting. And the comment I made about, I suppose, which must link to staff morale at some point. We seem to have a 30% failure to turn up for appointments which are clearly booked. That must have a significant impact, one on the appointee, who obviously isn't there for a reason, but isn't getting the help they need, but also on staff who are preparing for that appointment. I'm sure there's no magic wand, but there's something we probably, if we can reduce that, that will be a benefit both to the customer, for want of a better word, or the resident, and also to our staff. And I've seen David's got his finger out, so he's going to come tell me some good news.
I'm not going to give you any good news. I'm just going to say that it's being recognised, and one of the things that we took away from the cost of living crisis meeting that we had was to try to work with partners more closely, so that we had hot housing, for want of a better word, of different organisations in the same building, so that if you had a person come to a particular desk and you needed to refer them to CAB or to an energy advisor, that organisation was over in the same building. Because the big problem, as you say, Chris, is that what happens is when you refer somebody to another organisation and they leave the building, the dropout is quite high for all sorts of, genuine and acceptable reasons. But so to try to get organisations to co-locate and refer across a room rather than one day to the next is something we're looking at to see whether we can reduce the attrition rate in that manner.
Sounds like a really, really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just regarding voluntary leaver rates, notice that there's a jump from 1.2 to 4.6 between quarter 2, 21-22. Is there any particular significant moment that happened during that period that we've had such a high jump in leavers, and it's kind of stabilised around that figure?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, do please.
Obviously, one point around percentages is being a fairly small workforce. A ripple in the pool makes quite a big difference quite quickly. There have been one or two instances where changes have been made, which has caused some people to leave our employment. But that's not a widespread issue. If it was, it would have come to you as members. I'm being a little bit careful about how many words I use because there's obviously data protection implications. You would be, as a membership, fully cited if there were any significant trends. But I would just make the point that if we're having to deal with something, then it can affect the numbers quite quickly. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Actually, that might have made it less helpful. But I'm very happy to brief you further, any members.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that, I mean, what I was referring to is that, I mean, the reasoning behind those levers, was it lack of opportunity, ambition, or is there anything that we need to know about in terms of to keep those retention levels as low as possible, sorry, as high as possible and leavers as low as possible?
Again, just to provide reassurance that our process for exit interviews involves giving staff the opportunity to speak to either a direct manager, a trusted colleague, an HR colleague, a director, even a director from a different service. I can assure you there aren't any trends that you need to be aware of, members.
Questions or comments on this item? Oh, in that case, can we note, can we agree the recommendation? And also, I forgot to do that for the previous one. That was, take it as read. Okay.
Let's go through it again, just to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Okay, so that was item 6. Item 7 is the corporate risk management report, which is Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This is the regular report that comes to this committee each quarter. As it's titled, it's the corporate risk management report, and focuses on those risks that apply across the council rather than individual service risks. If I draw your attention to Appendix 1, the right-hand column has a trend indicator showing how the risk has moved since the previous quarter. There's 2 there that have increased in their risk profile, which we can now concentrate on. The first of those is the financial resources, and if you turn over the page, there's then some more detailed information on that. And I think probably the most important sentence is 3/4 of the way down in the bottom paragraph, where it refers to the unprecedented increase in energy costs and inflation, which is driving higher than expected pay awards. That very much plays against the council's finances. Obviously, we're an organisation which employs a large number of people as a proportion of our overall budget, and we also consume energy, whether it's at the crematorium, through the leisure centres, and so on. So the impact of those is what's driving the increase in the risk there, and will take us into the setting of the next year's budget, which we have later in on the agenda. The other one that's increased is leisure centre operations. There doesn't seem to be a supporting page for that, but obviously the increased risk here again is around energy. As I mentioned in the finance report, the membership of the leisure centres has improved, but the leisure operator is now facing a significant increase in its energy costs, and is looking to us to help them through that, as well as their own attempts to make the leisure centres as energy efficient as possible. But that's what's driving that increase in risk. I don't think there's anything else significant in the rest, but if anybody's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you for that report. You mentioned about the high cost of energy, particularly for the leisure centres. I know that some work is already happening behind the scenes, looking at ways of potentially saving energy with the leisure operator in terms of investments. Is there any sort of information you can share with us tonight about how that's going, or when that might come back to committee?
There's, I think, 2 strands that the leisure operator is pursuing. One is an immediate attempt to minimise energy use. So, for instance, along with lots of leisure operators, it's things like lowering the temperature of the pool and making sure the light bulbs are all energy efficient, and so on and so on. The bigger project that we've talked about is putting solar panels on Purdiswell, which we've talked about at previous committee meetings. I'm not aware of any more information on that, unless David or Shana.
I think the feasibility work is well underway following the very clear steer that was given by the previous meeting of information management. And I know I've heard our other director colleague talk about that work coming through and looking promising, but you know, on the back of your last committee mandate, but it's still a live piece of work at the moment.
It'd be quite nice if there was a deadline for when that would come back.
It'd be difficult for me to commit that on others' behalf, but I absolutely take the point, and I think the committee income management made that very clear, and it is obviously very pressing and live. Again, we can undertake to circulate something. I think, would it be fair to say it's Income Management Committee that is looking after that at the moment? So would you like members of Income Management to have an update on timescale? Would probably be best, wouldn't it? Yeah, okay.
I think Chris had his hand up before, is that right? Okay, James. Okay, James.
Chair, thank you. ICT security, I'm sure we're all acutely aware of the dangers that we all face on a day-to-day basis with this. Data is vulnerable, we all know that. Do we have the resource base within the business, within the organisation, to actually, first of all, I mean, you make reference to projects that are being undertaken today as we speak, but to administer those, but also to keep running at the speed necessary to make this as secure as it can possibly be.
I'll start on this one. Obviously, with the fact that the ICT service is run across the 3 districts, us, Malvern Hills and Wychavon, it does give us a larger economy of scale, as it were, than if we had our own smaller IT department. So I don't think we're certainly not lacking in terms of overall capability and capacity. What I would say is that we are constantly running exercises internally. We are constantly updating on our training, and the ICT team are constantly looking at ways of improving security and moving from servers to cloud-based activities, which are intrinsically more secure. However, having said that, there are local authorities, one not so far away from here, who had a major security breach a couple of years ago, I think now. And it is just so easy to slip up. One phishing email with a false attachment that is opened inadvertently, and people can be into your business. So whilst we're doing everything we can, and we are constantly, as I say, updating our systems, undergoing training, and running, we run regular tests across the staff, and some pass and some don't in terms of opening emails. We're doing everything we can, but we all have to be, all of us around this table, incredibly vigilant when we receive an email from somebody who we are not quite sure where the source has come from. Thank you.
Sean, do you want to add something?
Can I just respond on Councillor Stanley's point about resources as well? Two things that we've learnt as a management team, having had some presentations on this topic recently, is one, that if you can insure against the risk, it is worth doing, because the insurance will help you meet the costs of disaster recovery, consultancy time and so forth. And we have we have managed to successfully obtain insurance on that basis. But secondly, also, we've learnt that external expertise needs to be brought in if something very bad does go wrong. And we've received advice about where you get that external expertise from, and the sort of wraparound service you get involving the Local Government Association and the National Cyber Security Centre. So in answer to your question about resources, there's clearly a cost for the council in terms of that we factor into our budgets at the moment. There's then a large cost that materialises if something does go wrong. we've procured insurance against that, and we've taken advice about where we would go to get that support. So that's, I guess, our contingency planning about the resource impact going up.
If I might just add into that, I mean, I think it's right that it is a high risk because it is a, the reputational damage and the loss of systems is a very real one. And it has, as you say, happened to neighbouring things. And actually heard at a meeting today that the child health system in the NHS affecting a number of trusts has been subject to a cyber attack, so they actually haven't got access to their data records. With regard to the City Council, is a plea to fully involve councillors. I always have a fear that we're potentially the weak link in that people contact us from all sorts of places, and in a sense, we are open to those contacts, and when that we can't sort of ignore or blank out, if you see what I mean. And, sometimes the system that blocks some things, those choices as to what it blocks and why is not always obvious. And I think we as councillors, we're often forgotten in terms of the training and the input. We're sat at home on our own with a series of resident emails, and we kind of are self-taught quite often on some of these things.
We'd be happy to offer training for
Yes, I
members,
was gonna say,
absolutely.
I think that would be a good idea.
We'd be very happy to put that on. Again, the thing that we've understood as a management team is how much the nature of cyber risks and threats has changed in terms of how there can be a breach and then the implications of that breach. So I think it would, for anyone even who's got a degree of expertise, it's well worth a refresher. So we'd be very happy to put something on and offer a few dates on that.
While I happily accept the training, it is so difficult. Training would be great for me, but I'm never on the system because the system is so prohibitive for me as an external user to get onto it. And I've not seen anything in the 11 years, when 11 years ago I became a councillor and I went, this is too difficult. I'll work at home and stand alone. That for me would be a big step. I know it brings the risk because now we're using the system that you're on from my home, but it's just, unless something's happened, no one's told me about it, to make it easier for me to log on at home onto the system, which is why I still don't have a council email address, because it's just, for me, not fit for purpose. And trust me, it's not the only, because it's always difficult working remotely. I think organisations have made great bounds, but I do find ours very unwieldy to use as a member, as opposed to a member of staff. And I don't know why that is, but it's not. I mean, and I'm sure there are other members around here who probably do use it, because I use 2 or 3 systems. I don't find it easy to access. Getting nods. Oh, I did have a proper question though. Sorry, a proper question as opposed to a whinge. Apologies. The biggest risk on this whole register to me that jumps out is and we got a short paper on it from Duncan Rudge recently, which was very helpful, although I've gone back to him and asked him for the consequences of his comments, is our 5-year housing supply. And the fact that it's now become abundantly clear that as a city, we don't meet that. And that the risk to the council is relatively limited, but the risk to our residents is significant, because it could prevent us from being able to protect residents, to ensure that planning development in their areas is where we want it and how we want it. And that's my concern. And I'm sure we've got a plan in place, and Duncan, I know, is going to provide me some, well, all members, I asked him to provide it to, information on it. But that's what really concerns me.
Thank you. And obviously, members who may not have caught up their emails yet, it is just worth bearing in mind there is a briefing just before planning committee on this issue But what I would say for the record is that the 5-year housing land supply is one of a number of factors that our democratically elected councillors are allowed to weigh up when they balance planning decisions. It is not, and it can often be oversimplified as a statement that, you know, we've lost the argument if we've lost the 5-year housing land supply. It's absolutely not the case. There are plenty of other aspects of your decision and the materiality that you should consider at planning. And I'm sure that's something that we will make sure we're very vigilant about in terms of our future reports that come through. Once we have an adopted South Worcestershire Development Plan, we will be counting, and we've been examined then on the basis of 3 together, we will be counting our 5-year housing land supply again as a 3 council basis. So as members already know, we're very, very keen to get on with the South Worcestershire Development Plan. The consultation is live. We've then got about 12 months of examination to get through. Okay.
Hold on a minute. I managed to knock it.
It should be on.
Just a very straightforward question. Is that it? Okay, yes, it relates to some of these risk assessments and that. And I noticed on some of them, like for example, the one on page 77, we don't have an original risk score. Is that simply because it's the first time this has been assessed and therefore we don't have a previous one to reference to? Or has it just not been recorded on the actual report? I'm talking about things like staff resilience, where we don't have a white circle in the Rubik's Cube graphic. And there's a few like that.
Shane, if you'd like to join us online.
Yes, thank you, Julian. Through you, Chair. Yes, the councillor's quite right. These are the reason they don't have an original risk score is, as it says, for example, in the note, this is a new risk. We did several risks which we'd established under COVID, which we then, during the course of last year, then removed from the register. But in some cases, we felt there were aspects of them that needed to continue. So we created new corporate risks for this year. So that's why there isn't a figure in the original risk score. There's only a current risk score. You're quite right.
Things that have already been brought up again during this session, because if not, I'll ask Adrian to make his. You moved on. Okay, all right. You meet to look at risks.
From a governance point of view, the council's corporate governance board, which includes officers from the various council services, meets quarterly. Next meeting is this week, and that includes an overview of the corporate risks that we're talking about here.
Corporate risk management report. The next item on the agenda is item 8, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. Mark, again.
Thank you, Chair. This, I think I've said this before, but this is probably the most technical report that members receive. It's has a large amount of input from our Treasury advisors, Arlene Close, and includes lots of background detail in terms of the economy in general. I don't propose to go through it in detail. I'm happy to take any questions, but I think to give you confidence, the Council's Treasury matters are in keeping with the strategy that's approved as part of the annual budget setting, and we continue to follow the advice given by our advisors.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question about lessons learned from the issue with Thurrock as an investment. Have we made any changes to our policies and procedures in terms of making big deposits with people who are regarded as AAA, and awareness of members of the senior management and maybe members as well?
Thank you. Yes, I think there's two distinct things that we have put in place following the Thurrock deposit of the £3 million. Firstly, in the appendix to the finance report that we went through earlier, I've reinstated the Treasury page that sets out the individual deposits and investments that the council has at the end of each quarter. I previously retracted it because I thought it was too much detail and was trying to make the report a little more manageable. But to give members that full visibility and transparency, that's now in place. And if you refer to, I think it's appendix 7 or 8 in the report, you'll see that. Secondly, in terms of process, the Treasury strategy includes the fact that we do make deposits with other local authorities as well as with banks, and we base the selection of individual authorities on the advice given from the Treasury advisors who I referred to earlier. I then previously have approved those transactions. We'll now refer that to Shane as well to include him as the director responsible.
I guess it's a good news story in summary. So if my summary is correct, our return on our investments are up because interest rates are up. So if you've got cash and you've got it put away, that's good. Our borrowing is down as of last year, 700,000 pounds a day. And overall, due to some really good financial management, it's a relatively good news story. I'll just make sure my summarization is good, because we get lots of bad news in here, but that's actually, it's a relatively sound position.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Do we have a credit rating as a council? Yeah. And if so, what is it?
I have to confess that I don't know what it is at the moment. I'm happy to provide that.
I can tell you the answer is AA.
It's on page 89 of the report, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the question that Mark asked first, in relation to interlocal authority loans, is it a statutory issue that they have to be paid back to the lending authority? In other words, in the case of Thurrock, they're borrowing 0.8 billion to make sure that loans are paid back. As I say, is it on a statutory basis?
the lending to another local authority, and from a statutory point of view, would be the same as us lending to a bank or to a private company. The reality is that, back to the Treasury Advisor's advice, because the local authorities are part of the public sector, that the government would be highly unlikely to let a local authority go bust and not repay all of its debts. Hence, the risk there is, although theoretical, is minimal, and why our advisors consider them a safe investment.
Note the contents of the report. Then we come to the item 9, setting of the budget for 2023-24 and the MTFP to 27-28, which I guess is going to be Shane? Oh, no, it's you. Okay, carry on, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the next stage in the budget setting process for the 23-24 budget. You'll recall that we had the all members briefing just over a month ago, and this sets out a bit more background in terms of the budget areas that this committee is responsible for, and invites members to consider any amendments, any refocusing, or any proposals that they might want to include in the next round of budget setting, which will be presented to this committee in part of the January committee meeting. If members have got any thoughts or ideas that they would like officers to advise on or to develop, then we'd be happy to receive them. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I just ask something first? Do you mean in two ways? First of all, individual members coming to talk to you, and also via the committees?
Yes, either. I was thinking more along the lines of individual members, but happy to, given that we haven't got another committee meeting, for most of the committees, we haven't got another committee meeting until January. Obviously, this committee has a meeting in December as part of receiving the draft budget.
Adrian? Anyone else? Adrian, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just going to ask, given that your paragraph 3.3 and what you also said in the introduction about potential reallocation and looking at the way in which there's forecast spend and what we can and can't do, will you be preparing a list of where we are on each project that has already been agreed, with a view to sort of saying this has already started or not started, and therefore there is potential for reallocation or adjustment, which might assist our processes?
Yes, we're going to produce a list for members in terms of where we think there'll be a number of categories. There'll be some areas where we believe the activity has been completed in full, and for some reason there's still some money allocated against that budget. So our recommendation would be that allocation can be released from that particular project. There'll be those projects where activity hasn't taken place, hasn't started, and officers will look to those to suggest to members where we think it would be appropriate to no longer commence certain activities. So those are the easy ones, where we've got money left over or we've not yet started something. It's a lot easier than where you're in mid-process of doing something. So we're going to try to work through from the low-hanging fruit, for want of a better phrase, where we think there's opportunity, to where it might get more difficult in terms of bringing projects to a conclusion earlier than maybe planned. So yes, we will produce that information to help members in their decision making.
Thank you. I think that will be an enormous help. And I was looking at the Appendix 2. I noticed that there were 5 smallish green projects to which a large amount of funding was allocated. So I was looking at landscaping at Purdeswell and the Pocket Park at Sanctuary Close, Comer Gardens, Scorsell Elbury Mount, and the land off Cotswold Way. I mean, we know how important our green spaces have been to our health and well-being during COVID. So I'm not saying don't do this or anything like that, but I'm thinking maybe we need to phase some of these if we have the opportunity, because those total 634,000 overall, which is a very large chunk of cash, and maybe we need to phase them. It's just a thought.
More questions? Oh, and I no doubt we're all happy to note the budgets and the progress made. Okay, let's press on to agenda item 10, which is bus services within city boundaries. Which, oh, okay, David.
That's one for me, if I may, Chair. I'll start by just reminding members that this report emerges from a motion that was agreed at council. That's paragraph 2.1, and as part of the background, and then also to remind members that in previous years the council has not offered free parking, but as noted in paragraph 2.2, bus service has offered free parking services. If I just move on, I'm not going to go through all of the detail. I'll cut to the chase. So if you look to paragraph 3.5, we have done some work in terms of bringing this report to you, and our estimate in terms of cost is that to offer a free bus service would cost in the region of 14,000 per day. There would be an increase in take-up, no doubt, if we offered a free service. So in paragraph 3.6, you'll see that we've prudently increased that suggested budget to something in the order of £17,500. If you then move down to paragraph 4.1, you'll see that we have set out a number of options ranging from do nothing through to offering a free service, either on days to be specified or days in particular. And in this case, we're talking about the Christmas fair weekend, or alternatively, free travel on specified routes or reduced price tickets rather than zero cost. On balance, there are pros and cons. I think to try to offer a service on some routes and not others, we also considered whether we offered a service almost on a first come first served basis, but that would prove to be quite difficult, if not impossible, to implement. And you can imagine people being turned away because the free service was not available on that particular route. It would be very difficult. So on balance, we have come to the conclusion as officers to recommend, in view of the motion to members, that we offer a particular free travel service on a particular day. And our recommendation is option 3, that we would offer a free bus service to coincide with the the Christmas fair weekend, whether that's the Saturday and the Sunday or the Saturday, that would be for members to determine. The financial implications I've already mentioned in terms of 14 to 17,000 pounds per day. In terms of budget, where would we make this allocation from? There is a balance still remaining from 2021, where we set aside funding for various city centre initiatives. Some of that money was set aside previously, £50,000 for car parking at Christmas. And if members were minded to decide that they wanted to offer a free bus service, we would suggest that any funding would come out of that balance of that 185 as set out in paragraph 6.1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I've got things, but they're not necessarily in the right order. I'm going to start with Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say that did something similar up in Claims when I was the county councillor, offering free Saturday services for four Saturdays in February 2020. And it was possible to negotiate a fixed price with the bus companies because you're effectively just covering the cost of their anticipated income for that service. You don't then pay extra if more people use the service because you already covered what their expected income. And obviously there's a benefit to the bus service because they might then get follow-on business from people getting used to using the buses again if they've not used them for some time. And certainly I think all should be arranged through the county council sort of highways transport officers because their job is to negotiate bus services with the bus companies and subsidised services. So there'll be, that's their day job. If the committee's minded to go with the officer recommendation of 3, I would sort of suggest that we do a different Saturday to the Victorian Fair on the basis that the city centre is already going to be completely backed out, and a lot of people, especially a lot of Worcester people, do actually avoid the city centre on purpose on the weekend of the fair just because it's so busy. And if part of the objective is to support local businesses, then a subsequent Saturday, the one after or the one after that I think would be more beneficial and more accessible to more people, and also would give you a bit more time to actually organise it and advertise it, and let a bit more people know about it. Thank you.
I think it's actually quite hard to do any Christmas shopping when the Victorian Fair is on because the place is just heaving, and that's one of the reasons for doing it. I will come back to your proposed amendment. Thank you very much.
Chair, thank you. I really welcome this motion, and I think many of you who know me will know I'm very keen on buses, and I think with the climate emergency and everything we've done, we really need to encourage people to be using the bus again. I fully support this, but I think sort of similar to Andy, I think a lot of local residents do avoid the Victorian Fair, and I think we have this big run up to Christmas as well, where we have all the late night shopping and those sort of evenings. So I would welcome more than one day, sort of several days maybe to coincide with the events, with the late night shopping events or similar. But I think this is a real chance to get people back into the habit of using the bus as well. It's a real opportunity. So I'd like to see us use it as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I must say I have doubts about whether somebody would use the bus to take advantage of this, and then that would affect their future behaviour. But I mean, you might be right. Who knows? Next, we have Chris.
Thank you, Chair. It's clarification, I guess, and I think I heard it in the briefing, but it's not clear in the paper. The free parking the 50,000 for the free parking, this doesn't affect that. It will still be there.
Please, David.
No, there's no, the motion only asked officers to look at free bus travel. So that's what we've done. If members wish to consider a continuation of previous year's free parking, that's entirely within their gift, and you can have that discussion and make that decision this evening. But as it stands, this is only within the scope of the motion, was only to look at free bus passes.
And so if I could just come back, so I understand that this is in addition, but the 50,000 for free parking had already been allocated. So we're not taking that away.
The 50,000 out of the original 565, which was the year-end ring fence budget, 50,000 was taken out for last year to cover the free parking at Christmas offer. As it stands at the moment, members have not made a decision to allocate any of that. It was done last year. It wasn't done last year as an ongoing, continuing process. I think members could make a decision to do it again this year, but as it stands, as far as I understand it, it was last year.
I'll let Councillor Bayliss pick up the ball, because you've heard me 3 times now.
Thank you. As long as I've been on the council, we've had a parking incentive at Christmas to try and encourage people to support our retail economy. And let's face it, they're going to be having an even more difficult time this year than they've had in previous years. Not only have they got, COVID and the IT, the impact of online shopping, but they've also got the cost of living crisis, which is going to impact on people's. I didn't interrupt you. I don't expect you to interrupt me. It is a cost of living crisis, of course it is. You don't declare a crisis, but it is a crisis for the country. And what we've got here is a perfect storm. So I'm hoping and assuming that we will do what we have done for 20 years at least, which is provide an incentive for late night parking, free late night parking, and free on Sundays, which we've done in December throughout that period. We've never had motions to council about that. It's been part of a custom and practice, I would assume, every year for that period. So if somebody's shaking their head, but they haven't been around very long, but that is what this council has done. So, if we're not going to do that, then that would be a departure from history and would be something that I would very much be against, because it would be taking away something that the people of Worcester and the shoppers in Worcester have got used to. So we haven't had papers to council on doing these initiatives before in recent years. There was an additional money for car parking incentives. It wasn't about Christmas, if I remember right. It was about car parking incentives throughout the year to encourage post-COVID people back. So I'd ask the Managing Director to reflect on that.
Yes, that, and for the reasons you've outlined, I was keen to make sure that the reference to the parking, even though the motion was referencing bus travel, was included in the report, because I wouldn't want anybody to be under any misapprehension. As far as officers are concerned, is for the 50k that was set aside out of the 565 last year was for last year's subsidy to give free parking at Christmas, which is what we did. We didn't agree at that time as officers, and forgive me if I've missed it somewhere, we didn't agree at that period last year that the 50k would also follow through this year. That's why I think it's important that it's on this agenda this evening, so we can be clear about what members wish to do. whether they wish to continue with the, you're absolutely right, Mark, the custom and practice of offering a free car parking offer, whether they wish to supplement that with a free bus service, or whether they wish to do something different. So that's really what officers are looking for at the moment.
Interestingly, I've got a brother called James. Sorry, just to add to that, Councillor Bailey is absolutely right. For as long as I've been with the council, we've had a Christmas parking offer, for want of a better word. I think the difference last year was, although I can't remember the detail, that it was considerably expanded from previous years, and that's why the cost of it was seen as greater and closer to the 50k.
So if I may just add, because I think it is important, and then I'll shut up. That whilst members agreed last year to cover the cost of the free parking with the 50k, of course, in previous years, without the budget allocation, it has been something that the City Council has simply absorbed. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that the absence of the budget allocation meant that we didn't do it in previous years. Yeah, we did, but we just absorbed the loss of income in previous years. Thank you.
Just supposing we did want to agree that we were going to subsidise car parking, can that be done under the auspices of this paper? Yes? Okay. So, yes, I know. Sorry?
With due regard, Chair, there are a number of us that would like to speak on
Oh,
this issue. If it's possible to call speakers, and then we can, thank you.
The question I was going to ask is actually already been raised by Andy Stafford, and he makes a very good point that the cost of running the bus service is a relatively fixed cost, irrespective of the number of people who go on it. And if it increases the number of people going on the bus, then those costs aren't going up. So it would seem to me that we could potentially do a better deal with a better negotiation and have more than one day if we were to have some sort of better negotiation with the bus companies. And I do also take the point about the city is already very full at Christmas time, and maybe it would be better for supporting local businesses if we did something in January potentially, when it is less footfall in the city centre. Yep.
Thank you very much. Interesting discussion. I mean, to go back to the paper and the motion, and I've had conversations with Shane, or Shane has briefed us as chairs and vice chairs of this committee. I think the investigation of this motion and the lessons from it are really important. The idea of the motion was specifically during December, and as an alternative to the free car parking offer. It's not my understanding of the free car parking at Christmas is not custom and practice, but a series of decisions one year after another. As has been said, not budgeted for until last year. No action has been taken to identify a budget or to ask for it this year so far. And part of the motion is in part to support local businesses. It's also about inclusion. I mean, the paragraph about the social, environmental and economic implications. It is about enabling our residents within the city who don't and can't drive to participate in the Victorian Fair or to participate in the buzz in the city centre around Christmas. These things should not be only for those that can afford a car and that can afford to drive. There's also the environmental issue, and what is really interesting. So Shane has been engaging with the county council. I absolutely agree with Andy Stafford's point about the additional cost. That, you know, if the bus is being run anyway, more people on it doesn't mean a great deal. It's been really difficult to engage directly with the bus operators. They were not hugely willing to participate in the conversation, and the potential to enable people to come for late night shopping is a complete non-starter. There are no evening buses, which, you know, some of us were fully aware of, but I think, you know, is a wake-up call in terms of economic participation. And an offer in January is not at all the same thing. People won't have the money to spend, and you know, why can everybody not have the opportunity, a small opportunity, to participate in, you know, the Christmas and the buzz around Christmas in the city centre? I'm not wedded to it being the Saturday of the Christmas fair. I think that is a nice vibe and a nice intention. Possibly, you know, another Saturday within December, but it's a really important point of principle. The motion was passed, I think, unanimously or certainly overwhelmingly in the City Council, and I think we should absolutely, as a matter of principle, deliver something in December, please.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I am myself concerned about the lack of evening buses and aware of the need for us to encourage people to use public transport rather than cars. Can anybody else who wishes to speak please raise their hands again? Adrian.
I mean, I'm just surprised at the attempt to backtrack and reverse what was agreed at a council meeting in October, to be honest, Chair. I mean, I think that Andy Stafford's point has got some validity about whether it's necessary to support the Christmas Fair Day in the way in which is proposed in the paper specifically, and that is another very good reason why you don't have free parking on that day, because everybody comes in anyway. Why do you give up free parking on the Christmas Fair Saturday? I've never understood that. In terms of whether there has been free parking on a regular basis for Christmases in the past, from my perspective, what has always happened is that there's been some discussion with certainly with the council leader and certainly with group leaders, with officers about what the nature of it was going to be, because it has changed each year. It's not always been the same approach taken every year to how that is dealt with. So I think there's some disingenuity going on here. Basically, what this motion called for was a change in the way in which we approach things, bearing in mind our budget gap, bearing in mind the need to do something about encouraging local people into the city, and bearing in mind the need to improve and enhance the way in which we view our public transport system. And all those factors that, are all combined to suggest that this is a way in which we can direct the monies that in the past have been used towards assisting motorists in their car parking car parking fees, and using that money more productively and more constructively on a wider basis than simply trying to do that nice thing that we do at Christmas. This has got some real practical purpose behind it.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Can I have Pat next?
Thank you, Chair. I tend to be in agreement with Adrian Gregson here. I do think, however, that it would be a good idea to have that offer on the Christmas fair day to promote inclusion and hopefully to reduce some of the traffic congestion we do have on that day, because it is substantial. And it would be excellent to see people encouraged to use a bus service for an event which the city supports. Conversely, this issue about free car parking, I mean, this has been made as an individual decision with no knock-on effect year on year. It's always been emphasised by the party opposite there that this is made on a one-off basis each time. I mean, we may have made it several times, but you know, you make that decision on a one-off basis. Whether or not you do it again, I think, is a different issue. And given that we do have a massive budget gap, I'd be a bit wary of doing it.
Sorry.
Propose option 3.
Sorry, members, the whispering over here was because we've got feedback in the room and we were just checking whether there's anything we could do to reduce the amount of feedback, but I don't think we can identify what it is. So sorry, that was what that distraction was.
No, I just proposed option 3.
So, Chair, thank you very much. I am not opposed to the bus service motion as was proposed, nor are anyone, I believe, in my group. We were all supportive of it, some modifications on what was the best day, and that's why we voted for it at full council. What was never made clear in the motion, and there seems to be slipped underneath, that it would be, as a consequence, the cost would be that hundreds and thousands of people, not hundreds of, but hundreds and thousands would not get free parking. That is, the two have never been linked, which is why I asked the question at the beginning, because it suddenly became apparent that this meant if we gave free buses, we couldn't give free parking. So in which case, I would like to propose an amendment to the recommendation, which is that we would approve the bus service proposal and that the City Council continue to offer discounted car parking on the evenings and on Sundays, as previously has previously been done. I don't know whether I second her.
Yes, can I make a point? Yes. Yeah, can I make a point? Yeah, I represent Warden Parish North, and my nearest bus stop is Dover Avenue, which is about 4 miles away from the city centre. So, you know, we do depend on, you know, some form of motorised transport to get into town. There are many parts of the city which are actually within walking distance. The problem with Warden Villages is we have a very good weekday service and a good Saturday service, but after about 7:20 you can't get into town, so the evening one it isn't particularly viable, and we don't have any Sunday service at all. So my position on this is yes, a one-day free bus service would be very, very useful, it would be beneficial, and I think option 3 for that particular Saturday is a good idea. I agree with Councillor Andy Stafford's comment about the Christmas fair Saturday. I think that has enough attraction for people to go on the bus anyway, and I know certainly I try and avoid doing my Christmas shopping in the shops on Saturday because they're always really full on that particular Saturday. So I think a lot of people try and do it an alternative Saturday, hence the reason why I think Andy Stafford's comment is a good suggestion. I would also suggest that option 3 has to be tied in with a parking compromise as well. as you know, Mark Baldwin said, the 2021 offer was actually quite expensive, whereas I think the 2020 and 2019 proposals were much more affordable, and I think that would be the right mix to actually, you know, go for, which has got something for everybody across the city, I think. And I think that if we went for that, I think we could all go back home tonight reasonably happy that we've got something for our ward residents.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to speak in favour of the amendment proposed by Councillor Mitchell. Do you want to come back to that? Okay. In that case, I'll just speak on the wider subject, which is just there was a comment made about what the motion to council actually said, and that there was some reference to parking or something else in it. There wasn't. I'll read it. Council calls upon the Managing Director to bring reports to the relevant committees to enable councillors to consider cost and options for either free or reduced price bus services within the city during December, including weekends and evenings, which would help promote bus use and support key workers, retailers and other employees and other businesses. Nothing about parking, nothing about this at all. So any reference that this was disingenuous or that it was there and that council voted for it is complete nonsense. It was not on the paper, there was no reference to it. And so it was quite clear that this was a standalone motion, which was about bus services, which actually I think did win universal support across the chamber, and I think is something that we'd like to still support.
Thank you. Well, actually, I feel far more comfortable just dealing with what's in here rather than trying to agree that we should support free car parking at the same, as part of the...
Unfortunately, Chair, you've had a motion now, so...
Yeah, okay, all right.
May I provide some advice in terms of, for the benefit of the whole committee? There's obviously an important point about notice given for an item that's going to be discussed at committee, but within this report, there's clear reference to car parking in previous years. And therefore, I would advise that it would be in order for this committee to vote tonight on what it wished to do about car parking, because that is within, it is contemplated within the paper. It is not part of the officer options explored, but there is detailed briefing given. Therefore, I would consider notice having been given and that item having been published for 5 days, it would be legitimate for the committee to vote on that tonight if it wished. Are you happy with that?
Thank you, Chair. Contrary to the advice by the governance officer, there's nothing in the paper that gives us any indication of costs of any proposed use of free access to city car parks. So before voting on that motion and amendment, I would like to know what the precise costs are of providing evening and Sundays free parking throughout December, please, if that is the proposal. Because I don't see how we can make, as a policy committee, I don't see how we can make a decision on what we spend and what we don't spend unless we've got that financial information in front of us.
And presumably that information is not available now, in which case we would have to move it.
Chair, if I may, we don't have any detail on the cost of the bus passing, but we've been told it could be 14,000. We've been told if more people use the buses, it could be 17.5. If 3 times as many people use the buses, it could be 48. Oh, hang about, let me do the math. 52,000. So, accepting that risk, we have done this year on year. This is not. We're not stepping into the unknown. We know roughly what that hit's going to be, so it's not like we're exposing ourselves to millions of pounds worth of risk. I accept Councillor Gregson makes a valid point, and I would normally be saying, yeah, I want to know the numbers, but we've done this regularly. This isn't a mystery to us.
Chair, thank you. I'd just like to add another comment on a small polite request. Is obviously I was feeling slightly over optimistic when I spoke about evening bus services, because obviously, as I know from my own area, they're not across the city, so that's not practical. But obviously this time last year we didn't have the big increase in fuel costs. I mean, I think the last thing we want this year is lots of people trying to get into the city. It is a congested city. It will be busy at Christmas time, and it will cost people a lot of money even with free car parking, because they would just be sat queuing to get into the city. I would really like to see us be radical on this year, just move away, encourage people who want to come in the car. I believe they will come in the car, but I really think we should encourage buses. And I personally would like to see the 3rd, 10th, 17th and 24th of December offered to residents. And I would just like to say I fully endorse option 2, and I really think we should just go for it, essentially. Thank you.
Just a technical point. I think it's worth checking, and if I may speak to Sean, the Bus Services Act, because I have this nasty suspicion it says something about being able to subsidise routes but not tickets. But I think it's worth checking that.
Thank you, Councillor. We will check. Obviously, in putting the report together, our director spoke to County about how this could effectively be funded through a route that would enable it to be lawful, but we will follow that up. May I also just respond on this point about whether we've got enough information to make a decision, because I wouldn't like members to feel concerned on that, just from a pure governance point of view. Shane, and Shane's on screen, he may wish to join for this discussion, but we were just been exchanging an email about whether if we set an overall financial envelope, and that's something members wish to support, then the 2 schemes can be delivered within that financial envelope. So proposing a number and staying within those parameters. Obviously, the finer points are ordinarily delegated to chair and vice chairs of the committee. Shane, do you want to add something to that?
Through you, Chair, just to pick up on the point about the amount of financial implications of both car parking and the bus pass. In both cases, the estimates are necessarily quite loose. We've done what research we've been able to gather, what information we can. Is respect of the bus proposals, that was based on simply an estimate provided by the bus company and an average figure. So that gave us a suggestion that might be the amount that's concerned, but of course it would vary a lot according to what the level of take-up was and the number of days that we applied it for. In respect of car parking, as paragraph 2.3 says, although it's a very loose estimate, we've been able to indicate that the service provided in 2021 had a cost impact in terms of income of about £15,000. So there is sufficient information there to suggest that we could follow that and also deliver the free bus service too. In terms of putting an overall limit on that, as is stated in the financial implications, there are funds available which were there as a residue of the fund that was set up at outturn in June 2021 of £185,000. So there's sufficient coverage for both, if members were minded to adopt a proposal for both free bus passes and car parking.
Whether he has got. I mean, I'd really like to know a ballpark figure of how much that the free parking does cost, and I mean, if he's got, then I'll make a following point if that's possible.
We've just heard 15 grand. 15,000 is what Shane's just told us in paragraph 2.3.
Okay, no problem. I mean, yeah. I mean, thank you, Chair. I mean, at the start of this meeting, we opened the meeting with the news that we've got a budget deficit. Earlier this month, or the last month, we declared a climate emergency. You understand, we are in the middle of what's it called, economic crisis within the council. We are looking for funds to obviously increase to invest in our frontline services. I admit currently the reserves that we've got are going to be used to plug that financial gap. But isn't this the opportunity now to fundamentally shift how the council thinks in terms of to tackle what we've got? I mean, the definition of madness is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. When are we going to be brave enough to make some tough decisions to say, hang on a second, we've got to deal with some of these issues that we've been talking about and take some serious decisions? It may well be that we've got the money to deal with it this time, but going forward, I urge the council to look at what we're actually doing and how that actually impacts and what our overall aims. And these are some of the tough decisions that we have to make to deal with our budget shortfalls going forward and our reliance reliance on motor vehicles and our accessibility within the city centre in terms of our green agenda and our green ambitions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think these do complement each other. If you do the bus service on a Saturday, because if you then offer the free parking on the Thursday evenings, when there's evening shopping and there isn't a comprehensive evening bus service, and then also if you offer the parking on the Sundays, again, when there isn't a comprehensive bus service, and certainly many parts of the city do not have any buses running at all. And yes, it is a difficult climate, but it's also a difficult climate for the businesses, all the retail businesses, and leisure and other businesses in the city centre that will benefit if people come in. You know, people have an option, so they don't have to come to Worcester. And so if we're going to support our local businesses, our high street, then I think there's a really nice way that we can do the both together that encourage people to use the buses, but also are realistic that the buses don't run universally and will support the city centre on those other days. And certainly looking at how the calendar works this December, if you started the car parking initiative the weekend after the Worcester Fair, the Victorian Fair, then you're looking at 3 Thursday evenings and just 2 Sundays. So I think that puts a sort of limit on the costs compared to previous years. And then I think we'll be meeting all our objectives and our responsibilities to the city centre and the struggling retailers. And I'd also still like to propose my amendment about looking at an alternative Saturday to the Victorian Fair for the bus service, given that's the reasons I gave earlier about a lot of people avoiding the city centre on that Saturday, but also it's just 2 weeks away, the Victorian Fair, and does it really give officers enough time to put the service into place and advertise it? So I'd happy for that amendment to leave the final choice to chair and vice chair, but I think we should have the option not to go for that Saturday.
I've listened to quite a lot of the arguments put forward, and I'm going to row back from my support for January. I think Lynn has made a very good point about inclusivity, and I think people should be allowed to come to the city centre who cannot drive, who are not able to drive. I think the car parks are very likely to be full, and I think it'd be reckless of us with a budget deficit to basically be subsidising the car drivers when we have a problem with our budget. We should be supporting the bus services in the city. As we are sitting here now, COP27 is sitting, and they are urging us to do more on climate change. And here we are subsidising car parking in the city centre. We must support the bus services in Worcester. It isn't just about inclusivity, it is also about obviously the environmental aspects, but it's also about not only climate change, but also about air quality as well in the city centre. Many people on low incomes tend to live in the city centre, and they're disproportionately affected by the effect of cars in the city centre. So I'm fully supportive of the original spirit of the motion, which was put forward at the last full council, and I would be voting against the amendment that's been proposed.
Chair. So, Chair, can this use of the word inclusivity to try and say that buses are the only inclusive. My young daughter would feel much safer getting in her car, driving into the town on an evening, than getting in a bus and then having to walk up a road late at night back to our house. So using a bus is no more inclusive than using a car. And we shouldn't be using these terms to try and damn car drivers. And also there are people who have disabilities who find it easier travelling in a car than getting on and off a bus. So it's just not an argument that washes with me, I'm afraid.
Councillor Bates want to second the motion?
Yes. Can we move on and actually consider the amendments now? Can I just check, first of all, I believe we have 2 amendments, and the first one was Andy's. Could you please remind us of what?
With due respect, we seem to have had several suggestions about different kinds of free car parking. Can we have what actually is the proposal?
I've got it here, that the city centre...
Just as a point of order, Councillor Stafford proposed the first amendment, so unless he wishes to withdraw that and confer with his group, I think we owe it to Councillor Stafford to vote on his amendment because he raised it about 30 minutes ago.
Thank you very much. Not be on the day of the weekend of the fair, I believe. Is that the amendment that you wish to propose?
I'm actually happy to make the amendment just to make option 3 more flexible, to leave it with chair and vice chairs, because I think at the moment it just paints you into a corner. So rather than saying this, my idea is that Saturday has to be that Saturday, I just prefer maybe to say a Saturday in December and to be decided by chair and vice chair.
Would those in favour raise their hands? That's passed. Thank you very much. The second amendment, which was made by Chris.
Chair, my amendment was that the City Council continue to offer discounted car parking in line with the offer highlighted at paragraph 2.2 for years 2020 and 2019.
I'd like to speak on that, but yes, I think the Constitution gives me 3 minutes, actually, Chair. But I'll listen to your advice. I think if you live long enough in this place, you know you see the circle turn full ranks. And I looked up previous quotes, because we always put out a press release trumpeting our free offer at Christmas, and the one that's come up so quickly is Cabinet Member for Economic Prosperity Jeff Williams said, Worcester City Centre is an ideal destination for your Christmas shopping. Our festive parking offer will help to take the pressures off your Christmas budget while you shop. He was absolutely right in 2016. He's, posthumously, he's still right. That was right. That was a Labour administration that 1 year. They did the right thing. They gave motorists a bit of a bonus at Christmas. It doesn't cost us. It costs us buttons, really, in terms of our overall parking income. We make 3 million quid from parking income. This is a small thank you, I guess, to motorists in support of that. So I think it was very modest support on evenings, and the deal actually is that you pay for 3 hours, but you can stay all day on Sunday. Well, that's much better for retailers, because increased dwell time increases the amount of money that they benefit, and Christmas is so important to retailers. It's there when they make 80% of their profits. So I am fully in support of this, and personally I will want my vote recorded. We don't have name votes in committee, but you can ask for your vote to be recorded. I'm sure my colleagues will probably want that too, yeah. But on this one I absolutely support that.
All those in favour of the amendment on car parking? Okay.
you don't mind, Chair.
Yes.
Constitutionally.
Yes, of course, sorry, I'm still learning.
I mean, it's interesting that we're being dragged back to 2016, it's not that long, admittedly, that, and most of us still miss Jeff every day. So yes, it's very close. But he would be spinning in his grave if he thought that you were using this as an argument in the way in which you are. I mean, what I would say quite clearly is that that was a decision. From what we've heard earlier on this evening, we weren't making decisions about free parking in advance through committee system or through any kind of democratic process, but that very clearly was a decision that was made by the cabinet member at the time, as they were entitled to do. So there was a preemptive decision made on that occasion. So the idea that that has not happened in the past, it's been customer practice, is, as I said earlier, disingenuous. I would also suggest that one of the reasons for doing that at the time, of course, was the importance that we had attached to city centre retail, which we still attach to city centre retail. What we have established, of course, is that as a result of these kind of measures, and it's not the only one, but as a result of these sort of approach and support for city centre retail and other retail outlets in Worcester, that they are getting that support, they are getting that level of attraction, and they are getting that level of interest. And that is why, even through the COVID pandemic, when places were open, our footfall was still reasonably good. And that's another good argument for saying that we do not need this any longer as a bonus, as a bung, or whatever you want to call it. We don't need it any longer because we have attracted those people, and we know that they are confident in coming to Worcester and spending their money in Worcester and supporting the Worcester city economy. And I think that's the reason I'll be voting against the amendment.
Yeah, I just think some of those comments are laughable, to say that Worcester City is safe as a retail venue. I mean, that's just utter nonsense. Marks and Spencer's is going to potentially be closing multiple stores. Jules is going into administration. So to say that's done and dusted, it's saved, we've done all the work, is rubbish. And I'll be supporting this motion, amendment to the motion.
Want to speak on the amendment, we'll move to the vote. So those in favour of the amendment to include car parking subsidy, please raise their hands.
Thanks. That's 6. If anybody wants to name it, record it, please. Yes. All the names, or if you wish. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that's 6.
Thank you. And those against?
7 against.
Thank you very much, everybody. I don't know about anybody else, but I would like a 5-minute break at this point before we move on to the next item. Can you all be back here as soon as possible? Can I have your attention, everybody? We're about to start again. Could you please take your seats? Okay, we're ready to restart the meeting. Welcome back, everybody. We're now on to item 11, salary and grading competitiveness review. We also have what you might call a late paper, a supplemental paper, and what I think we should do is probably take them separately. And I now hand over to Sian to introduce the subject.
Thank you, Chair. This is a pay policy paper, and it's attempting to do several different things in one report in response to a piece of work that the Council's management team are doing in relation to salary and grading competitiveness, benchmarking the City Council against comparator district councils to understand whether our pay remains competitive. So the process we've been following is set out in the report, and that has been reported through to the Joint Consultative and Safety Committee. The three things that are addressed tonight, two of those relate to that review, and the third is a supplemental matter that I brought to you tonight that we will, as the Chair says, come on to shortly. So firstly, there's a set of recommendations to change the Council's salary structure and pay policy on our bottom grade, so what we call OPS 1, BS 1. There's a set of proposals set out in the recommendations that are necessary to get that full policy endorsement if the committee are happy to support it. There are a number of reasons for reviewing and uplifting this bottom grade. The Council's commitment to be a real living wage employer, cost of living pressures, and the piece of work that we've had done through our WME consultant that has provided tangible evidence of where our OPS 1, BS 1 grade is not meeting district benchmarks. So the proposal effectively will uplift that grade and begin it at a slightly higher salary, and that will have a beneficial impact on about 55 members of staff. And there's still the ability for those staff to go up on increments within that grade. The increments themselves obviously now move from a higher salary point to a higher salary point and so forth. The other thing that the paper is proposing to do is also in response to the work that's going on about pay and competitiveness, but it relates to all council staff on grades up to our TM2, which is our upper service manager grade. So all grades below head of service. And again, in result of the benchmarking, there is a proposal here to address the last remnants of the council's previous decision in 2011 to have a pay freeze. And so the proposal is to catch the City Council up with the national NJC pay spine. The recommendation notes that this would average out at an overall increase of circa 0.8% to all of the relevant pay scales, as I say, which goes up to and including the TM2 grade. And clearly, obviously then, as a function of all that, there's a recommendation to engage with the trade unions through the collective agreement to make those appropriate changes into contracts of employment. So those are the two things that are addressed in this report. The financial implications of doing that are summarised in the section So I'll just refer to those briefly. The impact of applying the circa 0.8 increase across those pay bands is estimated to be £85,000 when pension and on-costs are included. So it's £62,000 before on-costs. The implications of adjusting the bottom grade, removing spinal column points 3 and 4 and introducing point 7 is estimated to be just under £17,000. And obviously that is a slightly fluctuating figure depending on who's on that spinal column point at the date that this is implemented. The proposal for an implementation date is the 1st of December. And Chair, if I may, is it for completeness, is it useful to mention the pay award and the supplemental paper now?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So again, members will be aware that the national pay award has recently been agreed and communicated, and all council employees will receive the same pay award this year. It's a flat figure, and that's given in the paper. The proposal that has been made by the NJC committee through the national negotiations is to invite councils to consider making the back pay element available to members of staff who've left the council's employment since the 1st of April. And so there is a supplemental paper. I'm very sorry for the late notice of that. I had briefed chair and vice chairs on this issue. I was trying to collect some data from West Midlands employers about what other councils are doing, and I've set that out in the supplemental paper. We are being advised, and our survey suggests that it has become sector norm, at least for 2022, to pay back pay to leavers, but it's those people who make a direct request to the council, not for the council to attempt to contact all of those individuals. We've got about 40 leavers. The costs are a very cautious estimate is given at £20,000. It could be considerably less than that. It will not exceed that number in our estimate. So there's 3 matters. I appreciate you may want to consider the substantive report first, but I just thought I'd explain as a pay policy paper, it's doing 3 different things effectively, and they're all matters for the committee's discretion.
Thank you, Sian. So I'm going to ask people if they want to speak on the original paper, not the supplemental first. Anybody? Lynn?
Thank you. I mean, I'd like to speak in support of the paper. It's right that we pay equivalent to other authorities, and I think, you know, looking at paragraph 2.10, lessons to be learned, if you like, you know, due to a pay freeze in 2011, some of our lowest paid staff have had 10 years of being paid less than their peers. I'm very happy to correct that today, but I think, you know, we need to be mindful about when those kind of decisions are made of the long-term impact of them. So yes, I propose the recommendations.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mark?
This came to Joint Consultative and Safety Committee, which I chair, and was unanimously agreed. I think the long-term impacts of changes on salary are ones that, yeah, I do agree we should consider. I mean, things are done at a time, usually, to be able to maintain headcount, and so derivations from standard terms and conditions are usually made in order to keep everybody in a post in that way. It's a way of cutting the cake. But yeah, it is important, and I think these changes that are in this recommendation make sense and had universal support there.
Are we all in favour of those recommendations? If you are, please indicate. Yes. And then can we also look at the recommendation in the supplemental paper that we approve this principle of back pay to employees who come to us and ask for it? Would anyone like to speak on that? Indicate. I mean, to voting, yes. Sorry. Moving on to agenda item 12, disciplinary policy. Sian.
Thank you, Chair. This policy has come to this committee because we haven't had a recent meeting of the Personnel and General Purposes Committee, so therefore it's made its way onto the P&R agenda. This is a functional review. The policy was, in terms of the date on the front, well overdue for review. The covering report summarises what the changes are. Effectively, they are points of interpretation and clarification. The review does not change the balance of power as between management and staff. The policy went through the JCSC committee for review and was separately also consulted with the unions. Nobody has raised any concerns, and JCSC supported the proposed amendments. So I recommend it to the committee for approval.
Thank you, Sian. I have Stephen. Stephen.
Yes, I've just got a question really about it in general, about these policies. Obviously, have to be subject to some degree of interpretation, because looking at 10.9 on page 129, which says if an employee is suspended, they must not attend council premises or contact employees. Now, the big argument thing, attend council premises. Does that mean, for example, you wouldn't be able to, for example, go for a swim at the leisure centre, or, for example, attend a dance class at a community centre? So therefore, there must be some degree of flexibility in that. Because if you take that rule literally, it would mean people can't, and the suspension couldn't do some of the things a normal person would do in the city by nature of being an employee of a city council.
You answer.
I'm grateful, Chair. I'm grateful for your keen eye, Councillor. An improvement would be if it said your place of work. It isn't intended to bar a member of staff from being a member of the public. That would be a separate process. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just the way it's written. That's all you could consider that.
Thanks, Stephen. Do we have any more questions, comments? In that case, can I ask you to, I don't know,
Just approve the policy.
Yeah, to approve the policy.
Yes, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Now we're on to agenda item 13 about the Local Government Boundary Commission for England electoral review. This will be Sian again.
Thank you, Chair. This report is on policy and resources agenda because it is proposed that at the end of this month, full council will consider a submission to the Boundary Commission in response to their current consultation. And I'm sure members have read the paper and are already aware that the Boundary Commission, the Local Government Boundary Commission's review of this council continues, and that they've published a set of draft proposals as to warding arrangements. I don't propose to go through those in details tonight. We have a process that we're working through political group leaders. This report is on the agenda to seek a mandate to try and work towards a consensus submission, recognising that that can clearly only go so far as we have consensus, and it will then be a matter for other groups and individuals to make their own submissions as they see fit up until the Commission's closing date, which is the 9th of January. So the recommendations are just sort of work programme recommendations at this stage. There will be a submission document for councillors to consider as a paper going to full council. That itself will be shared with group leaders before it's published. In fact, it's already gone round tonight as a draft.
Thank you, Sian. I have Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I support that. I'd also like to make a public thanks to officers for helping the Conservative group with the modelling and the use of some of the tools that they have at their disposal, and enabling us to come up with courses of actions and look at the impacts and consequences of some of the ideas that we have. So that's been really helpful, and that continued offer of support is greatly appreciated. I should call out David Sutton personally, really, shouldn't I?
Thank you, Chris. Jabba.
Thank you, Chair. Can I likewise thank officers for all the work that they've done? It's been an intensive piece of work, and obviously there's different opinions from different political groups on this, and you know, hopefully each party can put their solutions forward, and the Boundary Commission to review.
Thank you. Lynn.
I think it's probably also worth putting on record at this meeting now that many of the Boundary Commission proposals or suggestions are eminently sensible and probably not controversial. Redrawing the map is always going to be a challenge, and I think, you know, it has challenged some of our thinking and some of each of us as individuals, because, you know, we represent particular areas. So it is right that we rethink those things, and much of it is eminently sensible. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Does anybody else wish to speak? In that case, can I ask you to indicate your approval?
Yes, that's carried as agreed as recommended.
Thank you. We now come to item 14, appointments to outside bodies.
Thank you,
Yes.
Chair. Julian's going to take us through the process of receiving nominations. You'll be aware as a committee that, again, it's a function of this committee to consider various appointments which sometimes fall outside of the annual cycle of making appointments. This report tries to clarify, in response to questions we've had from councillors, whether it's necessary for the representative to be a councillor or not, how long the term of office would be, and so forth. So those bodies are set out in the report, and I don't know, Julian, do you just want to take them one by one?
Thank you. Yes, I have contacted group leaders and invited nominations. I had some responses. I should say some of the bodies listed, we don't have any nominees, in which case those will just remain open until our next annual round of appointments in June. If I go through the list, we have no nominees for Angel Centre Committee. Disablement Information Advice Line, the Green Group have nominated Eleanor Round. Perhaps if I just go through the list rather than voting on them one at a time, would that be more helpful? Just get through to the end. Yeah. We have no nominations for Hot Market Charity. We have a nomination which has come from the Labour Group for St Martin's United Charities, which is Atif Sadiq. We've got no nominations for Shop Mobility or for the SWDP Joint Advisory Panel. Transition Worcester, we do have a nomination to replace Councillor Lawrenson. That is Councillor Karen Lewing. The next two ones, which are health nominations, as you see there, the indication is that it should be preferably Chair and Vice Chair of Health and Wellbeing Committee. So that will be Councillors Denham and Stephen Hodgson. And the final one was the City Parish Relief in Need charity. I have a nomination there from the Green Group, which is Mr. Adrian Cooper. If it's possible to take all those on block, or if there are any other nominations.
Chair, I was just going to say for the Hot Market. Oh, go on, Karen.
No, okay, sorry.
In which case, now having that clarified, I'm happy to nominate myself on that.
So we'd add Chris to the list then. That's for Hot Market Charity. Okay, Chair, if you're happy then with all the names that I've read out, including the Chris Mitchell on Hot Market Charity, if members could vote on all those together, that would be helpful.
approval?
Yes, that's all carried.
Thank you. Item 15 is, we've now got 3 referral reports, 2 from communities and 1 from health and wellbeing. And I'd just like to remind you that these are subjects that have all been fully aired at the relevant committee meetings beforehand. And they're only being referred to us because of the amount of money involved. First of all, we have a referral report from Communities Committee, Procurement of Housing First Service. Who is?
I'm happy to, Chair, though I think you've done a very good job of explaining the remit of this committee. This is a financial allocation. Funding is available for the first 2 years of the contract, and this report asks for approval to draw that funding down from our DLUP grant funding and homelessness prevention grant, and notes that this committee will need to receive subsequent reports to identify future funding for the rest of the contract term.
Thank you. Could you indicate your feelings? Are you in favour? Oh, yes, sorry, Chris.
It's just a comment, really. I took the time to read the supporting paper because I don't sit on communities, because I've sort of got a bit of a soft spot for St Paul's, and it's really good to see them delivering such good work over the last few years. So just wanted to publicly commend them and their staff. Do a great job.
Thank you, Chris. Oh, Pat?
Thank you. I'd just like to endorse that. But I'd also like to re-emphasise an issue that I mentioned earlier this evening, and it's stated at 2.5 that all Worcester's participant spaces are at full capacity. And it's clear that we do need more capacity there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? In that case, can we move to the vote?
Yes, that's carried.
The next one is a referral report, again from communities, about the procurement of the single person and childless couples homeless prevention support service. Sian?
Again, thank you, Chair. It's the same mechanism here, that it is proposed that for the first 2 years of the contract, the grant is drawn down from the homelessness prevention grant, again with the same recognition that future funding reports would need to come forward to identify a suitable allocation for the rest of the contract term.
Thank you, Sian. Does anyone wish to speak? In that case, can we move to the vote on the recommendation?
Chair, that's carried.
And the final one is from the Health and Wellbeing Committee. Is this you as well, Sian? Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report proposes match funding of £160,000 to provide mental health support for children and young people for a 2-year period through the creation of some temporary posts. The only thing I need to add here is that I've become aware today that the funding sources of this proposal may need some revision. And so I would suggest that we work with Chair and Vice Chair just to potentially review that.
That sounds very
intriguing.
No, not with any intent to revise the 160,000, simply to potentially change the source of the particular reserve that it's drawn from.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? In that case, can we move to the vote? Oh, Lynn, you do.
I mean, just as chair of the Health and Wellbeing Committee, firstly to say that it had unanimous approval. Mark's being somewhat cryptic about the source of funding. I mean, we were given assurance last night that the Public Health Department were in support of the proposed source of funding that from the COVID reserve funds was acceptable. If there's been a change in that, it would be interesting to know.
Just to be less cryptic, through you, Chair. No, there isn't. There isn't any issue in terms of public health funding. What we have identified is we need to review our comp reserve funding, which has got 148,000 allocation against this. We need just to check the balance remaining within that pot and maybe take some money from elsewhere to cover the full cost. So it's an internal matter for the council, not an external matter with partners. Okay.
Any more questions or comments on that particular matter? In that case, can we move to the recommendation?
Yeah, yes, that's carried.
And finally, we've reached any other business. I have an item of any other business. I also know of one more from Chris. We'll take Chris's first.
Thank you, Chair. I took the opportunity to email you earlier today. It's a comment really that, and I hope other members of the committee are in agreement, that the last couple of P&R committees we've had, the agenda seems to be unwieldy in the size, 15, 16 agenda items. Just doesn't really enable us, one, to probably give it due diligence when we're reading it, and two, to debate it. And we had a couple of instances today, I know, where you try to move it on, quite rightly, because otherwise we'd be here until 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's just whether we can look at in the future, if we need more P&R committee meetings because the workload is such, then maybe that's the case. But I'd rather do the job properly than skim through some stuff because we've got 16 items. That's my comment.
Does anyone want to respond to that comment? Personally, I would agree that this was too heavy an agenda.
I think Chris makes a very valid point, and I think we'll take it away as officers just to make sure in future we don't overload the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, Jabba.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, all valid points, but I mean, under the scheme of delegation, we do have, in terms of chairs and vice chairs of committee, whether some of these items can just simply go through that motion, through that process.
If I may,
Yes,
we don't have any standing scheme of delegation for chairs and vice chairs. Where the chairs and vice chairs get their delegations from is when a report's been through committee. That's our committee model, that the delegation follows the committee decision instead of being up front. Nor do we have in this committee system much of an officer scheme of delegation either. Therefore, necessarily, P&R is always a real milestone in the diary. And if you look at the range of business we've transacted tonight, it would be difficult to see where else under our current governance arrangements that would go. So unless we had a subcommittee of P&R which met more frequently, which would be another option we could look at. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments on that suggestion from Chris? In which case, I'd like to go on to my AOB, which is about the city transport strategy. This is something we covered about 3 hours ago, if you can remember that far back. There's a lot of work going on in both the city and the county to come up with a transport strategy specifically for the city centre. Obviously, we're going to be leading it, but we will be working with the county. I'd like to propose that councillors get more involved in this process through the setting up of a small steering group consisting of one councillor from each group. Just so that we know what's being talked about, what ideas there are, and the group can contribute their thoughts at that time as well. Can I have your response?
I think it's not really an AOB item, Chair, for tonight. No, I think you better do it at group leaders and float it there, then, because it's not, there's no paper, there's no officer advice, there's nothing of the usual on something, but it's not necessarily a bad idea, but I think it's probably best done through group leaders in a discussion would be my advice.
I'm happy to take that suggestion. Yeah. So, and Jabba.
Just a comment, if that through you, Chair. On two of my previous committees, I've had members walk out without any acknowledgement to the chair, and today we've seen a member walk out as well. And I think just a point of order in terms of if people do wish to leave early, they at least acknowledge the chair and notify the chair to say that they're going to be leaving early.
I know that. Actually, Councillor Alcott did notify the chair and explained why she had to leave early, and it seemed to me to be a reasonable. But I completely agree that councillors should do that. I declare this meeting over. Thank you very much for your participation.